On the air is what I'm here to talk to you about. Can I see, have any of you participated as a chaser or an activator in any way with Summits on the Air? Nobody? Okay, we got chasers. Okay, great. So some of you know a little bit about it. I'll just a little quick introduction about myself. As John said, N3, NNU. I've been licensed since '92. I was in my late 20s. My grandfather was a ham. I was always interested in it as I was growing up, but he really wasn't in a position to be an Elmer for me. He lived down in Florida, and I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, thus the November 3 call sign. That is my original call sign. I believe it was a Tech Plus at the time. I've kind of forgotten. I quickly upgraded to Advanced, and I was in Advanced pretty much forever until about 2 years ago. I finally upgraded to Extra Class. Like a lot of you, I was inactive for about 20 years in there. Just life and family got in the way, but I never let my call sign expire. And I'm glad to kind of get back into it a few years ago. Currently, I'm serving as the vice president of our club over in Cherokee County, the Cherokee Amateur Radio Society. Vice president is a miserable job in our club because it means you're in charge of field day. So I don't know how it works in your club, so my sympathies to your vice president if that's the case. But my favorite thing right now in the hobby is SOTA, Summits on the Air. I really enjoy doing CW. I do single sideband as well, but I like QRP operations. Even when I was a kid, I had a huge collection of QST magazines. I can't remember, my grandfather gave them to. I had like 30 years of QST magazines and CQ magazines. When I was young, I was always into the outdoors anyway, and I would just drool over these little QRP kits that would, guys like Wes Hayward and stuff were building in QST magazines. So I was just always kind of passionate about that stuff. So Summits on the Air is a program that started back in 2002 in the United Kingdom. It's similar to the Islands on the Air program if you participated in the Islands on the Air in some way. But basically the purpose of it is to encourage people to get outdoors and operate on summits, all right? And it does not exist in every country. Associations have to come together. An association can be, in the U.S., most states are separate associations, and then they maybe are divided up into groups. But so Georgia is Whiskey Golf 4, or Whiskey 4 Golf, so that's the Georgia Association, and then there's 3 subgroups in there. But the whole U.S. is covered, Canada's covered, it's very popular in Europe, so there's quite a few associations in Europe, but it's not every place you go. And what constitutes a summit is, it takes a little getting used to. So to get information about SOTA, the first place for you to go to is this website here, which is the sota.org.uk. That's kind of where all the foundational documents are. It's got the rules, kind of talks about how it's organized, tells you where the associations and the summits are. And then the other website that you want to get familiar with if you're interested in this is one called sotawatch.org. There's a link to it on the SOTA.org website. But the sotawatch.org is where you would go to register to be an activator or a chaser. You need to register just so you can log. You have to log in their program in order to get awards and certificates and things like that. But it's not difficult. There's no cost associated with it. There's a reflector for news items and things like that. And also, that's where they post alerts and spots. Alerts is, as an activator, if I'm going to go out and activate a peak a couple of days in advance or the day before, I might put out a little bulletin on the alert saying I'm planning to be on this peak, more or less this time, these frequencies. That just lets people know that you're going to be out there. And then once you get up there, you can spot yourself. This is one of those occasions where spotting yourself is acceptable. I know it's not the case in some different types of contesting and things like that, but for Summits on the Air, spotting yourself, if you can, is entirely acceptable. So there's a spot to go to check current spots. So for example, on my iPhone, I have an app, which I'm going to show you here in a minute, called SOTA Goat, which is an app that's, I think it's only available for the iPhone system. I don't know if there's something comparable in Android or not. But I could pop that open right now, and I can see, what peaks are active right now. Now, this time of night, I'll tell you, most of them are probably going to be in Japan. Japan is very active. I've never contacted somebody on a peak in Japan yet, but only had a couple out of the U.S. actually. But there's a database for all the summits. There's an online mapping resource. There's just a lot of information here. So it's a good place for you to go to kind of find out a little bit about how it is organized. And then this is the app that I was telling you about, SOTA Goat. It's an app which I have on my iPhone. There again, a lot of the stuff that's there on that SOTA Watch website is replicated in this app. It's very handy. I spend a lot of time in places like church and other things like that where I shouldn't be on my little phone, that I'll be sitting there planning where my next hike is, and I might pull up that little website while my wife is not looking and be dreaming about things that I probably shouldn't be dreaming about at the moment. But it's got a mapping database in it as well. It also has the spots and alerts, so you can kind of see what's going on. And then you can use it to spot yourself if you're up on a peak and you want to let somebody know that you're out there activating. So a handy tool to have on your phone. Did I go up or down? There we go. So I've already mentioned distinct geographical areas are organized by associations. Each DXCC entity can form an association, but you can also have associations within DXCC entities. And then, so large entities like the U.S. are divided up into multiple organizations, a lot of separate organizations. And some small DXCC entities sometimes combine together. I don't know off the top of my head which one those are. Probably a couple of small European countries that maybe combine together to form an association. And there's areas where there's just not a whole lot of, you're not going to find a summit in Florida. I've checked. There's nothing that constitutes a summit in Florida, all right? There's a lot of the Midwest. There's not going to be a lot of summits. But you'd be surprised where there are summits. So going back to that SOTA Watch website, this is an example of what you would do if you wanted to start kind of planning peaks. So here, this is Whiskey Fort Gulf, Georgia, North Georgia, which is kind of the northern and eastern part of the state. We're very fortunate in this state. We've got a lot of mountains that we can hike, and it's got all the peaks listed for that area. You'll see that each of these little cones, different colored, there's points associated with each one. The points are based on the elevation of this peak, and I'll talk about that in a second. But basically 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 are the different point totals that you can get. And as an activator, you get a point for activating that peak, or as a chaser, somebody sitting at home or in your car or whatever, you get a point for those points for contacting that peak. And it's based on that elevation. It's not based on the difficulty of getting to that peak, which is quite interesting to me, because there are some 10-point peaks that's very easy to get to the top to, like Brasstown Bald. I'm sure a lot of you have been up to Brasstown Bald. You used to drive up to the top of it. I think maybe you can in the winter still. But nowadays, you just get on a little shuttle bus and they take you up to the top. Now, the rules for summits on the air is you have to get to your operating position by your own power. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't drive up there. You can drive up to the top of it, but you got to take your radio gear and you got to get out of that vehicle. So you're not using a mobile radio. This is true portable operations. But there's nothing wrong with taking that shuttle up, and having a portable QRP radio or something. Kennesaw Mountain is the closest one to us right now. I checked it on the app when we started tonight. That one I think is just 1 or 2 points. I can't remember how many points it is. But again, it doesn't. I've been to some 2-point peaks that absolutely kicked my butt trying to get to them, and 10-point peaks that were very easy, but then some others that are pretty hard. But it's a lot of fun. I mean, obviously, as an activator, I try to go after the ones that are higher points so I can accrue more points that way.
Question?
Yes, please.
What determines the point value?
So I'm going to talk about that in just a second. It's all based on the elevation. Yes?
I'm sorry if you already explained this, but the colors, I saw some were green and red.
Yeah, that's just, that matches up with the point numbers. So some maps are different for some reason. Usually 8 and 10-point peaks are red, although on this map it's only 10-point peaks. The yellow ones are 8 points. These green are 6. These kind of bluish green are 4. And it doesn't look like there's any 1 and 2-point peaks up in that part of Georgia. But it's just distinguishing between the elevation of those peaks. So back to the definition of what constitutes a peak. And I'm not an expert in this part of it. It still confuses me to this day. But it's all about what they call topographic prominence. And this is the definition that they use. I copied it right off of Wikipedia. And it has to do with the separation of that peak and the contour lines from the next peak. There has to be a certain amount of distance. So you and I might look at some of our mountains around here and look at something that to us clearly looks like a peak, but for this definition, it doesn't constitute a peak because somehow there's a ridge going from it to another part, and they're going to count the other higher part of that peak as the summit. So it's a little confusing because sometimes you'll see things and you think, oh, surely that's got to be a peak, and it's not. But it's not hard to find the ones that are peaks. And so that's just kind of the definition. And again, it's like 150 meters, and the association itself kind of distinguishes what constitutes those point levels. So, for example, we have 10-point peaks here in Georgia: Brasstown Ball, Blood Mountain, and there's quite a few of them. A 10-point peak here in Georgia, of course, isn't nowhere near as high as a 10-point peak out in Utah or Colorado. You know, we don't have any 14,000-foot peaks, but it has to do with the difference in the size and the space and all that kind of stuff. So, but we're very fortunate where we live that we have a lot of peaks that we can activate and chase, and we have pretty good weather, so you can pretty much do it year-round. You know, one of the things that's for a lot of associations, there's a winter bonus. If you get extra points if you are activating certain peaks in the winter. Now, if you're in, southern Arizona, I don't know if they have a winter bonus or not. I think all of them get pretty cold there. Kind of 3 ways to participate in SOTA. I'll talk about really just the first 2, activators and chasers. There is a shortwave listening activation. I honestly don't know that much about it. I'm sure it's just like the old SWL things. If you are a shortwave listener and you hear an operator and you somehow let them know, you get points for it. I don't know a whole lot of folks that actually do that anymore. But there are rules for that, and there are certificates and awards that you can go after. The easiest way to get involved in Summits on the Air, and what you, those of you that raise your hands have probably done so far, is as a chaser. That's how I started. I think I was sitting at home one day, not terribly long ago, I mean like a year and a half ago, on my, I had my 2-meter radio going, and I heard some guy calling Summits on the Air from, I think it was Blood Mountain, and I live in Cherokee County. I was like, man, 2 meters, that's a long ways, from Blood Mountain. Because the other thing with Summits on the Air is it has to be, you can't go through a repeater. It has to be a direct QSO. So you can't use a repeater. Simplex, thank you. Yes, the word escaped me for a minute. So that was my, I talked to the guy, and I was like, what is this Summits on the Air all about? So I kind of looked it up, and it was really fascinating to me. So then I got very involved as a chaser, because you kind of sit at home, right? And you kind of, if you hear somebody's out on a peak, you give them a call, and you get points for it, and it's pretty easy to accrue points. Now, one of the things that always I find interesting about this, in the rules, as an activator, if you activate a peak, so if I hike up to the top of Blood Mountain, which I did earlier this year, I can only get the points for that peak once a year. So if I hike up to it the next day, it's good exercise, but I'm not getting any extra points. All right? As a chaser, you can contact, if there was somebody up on Blood Mountain every day, and you contacted somebody up there every day, you would get those points. So it's a lot easier to accrue points as a chaser and get to your award status as a chaser than it is as an activator. I find that kind of interesting because it's harder work being an activator, but nevertheless, that's how it works. So as a chaser, you can review the chaser rules at the website that I shared with you there. Just kind of look around for spots. So when I'm down in my shack, if I'm working on something, usually the first thing I kind of do is look to see is there any activators out there that I can get a couple of points by contacting them. And this is a very collaborative effort, right? As an activator, if there's not somebody to talk to, if you didn't have any chasers, you wouldn't be getting anything done, right? And so it's just as important to have those chasers, and they should feel just as involved. Yes, sir.
Can you get points for, like, you're an activator? Can you also get points as a chaser?
Yes.
Both.
Yes. And so the way that usually happens, you can get, if I'm sitting at home, I can be a chaser. To be an activator and a chaser at the same time usually comes in what they call a summit-to-summit contact, right? So if I'm out on a peak and I hear somebody else who is operating from a different peak, not the same peak that you're on, so an eyeball QSO doesn't count. If there's somebody out on another peak and you make a contact with them, you get extra points because you got the points both as an activator and a chaser. So a little pet peeve of mine that I'll tell you about just as you get involved in this, because I do a lot of CW when I'm doing this. I do both single sideband and CW, but since these are mostly QRP operations, CW is a better bang for the buck. But if you're out there as a chaser and you hear two operators trying to do a summit-to-summit contact, let them get it done. I mean, one of the things that just drives me insane is when I'm up on a peak and I'm trying to make I'm hearing some guy out in Colorado or Virginia or whatever, and because usually what you send is just S2S. That's just a quick signal. This is another summit trying to talk to. And all these chasers, and you'll find that there's a core group of chasers. I mean, I have QSOs with the same people all the time, and I appreciate it. I mean, I've got their names, memorized for the most part now, because I know Bruce in New Jersey is going to be one of my first contacts, because I think he sits at home all day and does nothing but chase summits, and I'm glad because I need him on that other end. But all these chasers will be jumping in there, and most of them are operating QRO, or 100 watts or whatever. If you hear that S2S, please just stop operating for a minute and let those folks get that contact done, because it is so frustrating to hear, because they're usually pretty weak signals, and you're trying to get that message across, and you just can't break through. Usually, eventually you do, but you have to wait for the bigger guys to kind of finish their operations. But you just kind of search, see who's out there. They're very quick exchanges, almost like contest exchanges, because really all you're doing is giving a signal report, and if you're a chaser, you're usually sending your state, where you're located. You usually don't go into the detail of, like Canton, Georgia or something like that. You're just going to say, Georgia. And it's just a very quick exchange, and the activator is going to move on to the next one. Because these folks are dealing with potential weather issues. One of the things I forgot to mention is when you go up to the top of the summit, the rules allow you to operate from about 80 feet below the actual peak, and that actually widens the area quite a bit. As far as the contours go, because there's some peaks that you might be standing like on a pinprick to actually be on the top of the peak, but weather issues could be a little bit dangerous. So there's things that I had a nasty one out in Utah that I thought they were going to have to come and save me. The weather just moved in on me really quick, and I was huddled down. It was at the top of a ski resort, and I was basically I broke into a ski patrol cabin. Big signs everywhere, prohibited, do not enter. But I was like, well. They can either come and find me dead outside tomorrow, or I can just be inside here and wait for the storm to go past. But so very quick exchanges, and as an activator, when you go up to the top of the peak, you have to have 4 completed QSOs for it to be a successful activation. So usually you aim for more than that. I mean, my minimum is usually 5 or 6. I usually have quite a few more than that, but you want to have a couple extras, because I've had those times where I've gotten back down and I wrote down the wrong call sign and I'm logging it and there is no such call sign, in QRZ or whatever. So you want to give yourself a little room for errors. And it's just as frustrating when you do that, because there's some guy or gal on the other end that thought they had a QSO with you and you don't get it in the logbook. Yes, sir.
How do you know what summit they're on with the short exchange?
Well, excellent question.
Call sign.
Each summit has a designator. I'm trying to think. Brasstown Bald is going to be W4G/NG for North Georgia 001. So there's a unique designator for each summit. And theoretically, you could exchange that summit identification number. Now, because most of us are spotting ourselves or being spotted by somebody else, that information is already on the website, right? So they're seeing, Joe is up on this peak, and it already tells you what the designator is. So we usually aren't wasting time, sending what the summit is. However, when we're doing summit to summits, a lot of times we do. So if I send out a summit to summit request to another guy, and he hears my call, I'll usually say you're 559 whatever on, and then I'll repeat the summit designator twice, because he may not have access. You're not getting cell coverage or whatever all the time, so you're not able to see, where is Joe, what peak is he on, and so usually repeating it twice, and so we can exchange those summit designators. But a lot of times I'll go through an entire day or morning or whatever of activations without actually putting my the summit designator out there because it's already on the website. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes, sir.
Do you ever come up to the situation where there's two of you on the same summit?
Yeah, I was talking to this gentleman over here the other day, a few minutes ago. Back in early October, there's quite a few active activators in Georgia, and there's a group of them that they do every spring and every fall. They do a SOTA camp out somewhere up in North Georgia, and it was around whatever weekend we were talking about. Like October 13th, 14th, 15th, that time frame, that first cold front that came through. And I had forgotten all about the camp out that weekend because I wasn't going to be able to participate in the camp out. But I was up on Raven Bald, and I usually get out very early. I like to kind of get up on these peaks and get going. But then all of a sudden, I always have a 2 meter with me. I don't do a lot of 2 meters. I should mention that these QSOs can be any mode. You can CW, single sideband. You can use digital modes. I mean, they're all as long as it's simplex. You just can't go through a repeater. So I'll always have a 2 meter radio with me. I don't use it a lot. I have another purpose for that I'll share with you in a minute. But anyway, I was up there on Raven Bald, and all of a sudden I'm hearing all kinds of. There's somebody over on Brasstown Bald. I mean, there was like 10 different peaks, that were active that morning. And I realized it was the camp out. And then there's a husband and wife team out at Tennessee. That are very active activators. She's blind. I mean, it's fast. I've never met them in person. I look forward to meeting her someday. But they hike up to these peaks. He must lead her up there somehow. She operates single sideband. I don't think she's a CW operator yet, and he's a CW operator. But anyway, I was up on Raven Bald, and 2 other activators came up, kind of just as I was finishing up. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can have multiple activators up there. I mean, you can take some people up. I've taken up my daughter with me. I've taken my son with me. They're both ham radio operators. And in that kind of situation, in your alert or your spot, you usually ask the chasers to contact each one of you. So it's not unusual to get your QSO quick and then say, here, have a quick QSO with my son or whatever. And they're all very good about that because for them to also have a successful activation, they've got to have at least 4 QSOs. But it's not unusual to run into other operators, other activators. I ran into a guy who actually started the association here in Georgia. He lives over in South Carolina. But I went up to a peak one day, and I was on another peak earlier that morning. And then, some of these gaps, you have peaks on both sides. So I did, one peak on one side. Can't remember if it was the Appalachian Trail or Benton McKay Trail that I was on. And then I was going over to do the other peak, and he was up on that other peak. And so it was fun. I mean, it's just, it's like running into somebody at a ham fest or something like that. I mean, we've talked to each other on the air a bunch of times, but we've never met in person. So we spent, probably an hour, just sitting there comparing notes and not activating. And then, so when you complete your QSO, you go to that website, you go to that SOTA Watch, there's a database in there that you have to register for, and you have to log your contacts, both as a chaser and as an activator. That's where the record basically would be kept for your awards and certifications. Now, I don't think they really spend a whole lot of time checking this. It's mostly kind of on an honor system. The awards, except for the big ones, are free. You got to pay for them yourself for the big awards anyway, so it's not like it's costing them any money. But it's worth obviously following the rules. And this is an example of the types of awards and certificates you can get. There, as a chaser, after you've got 100 points, you get a certificate, and then I think 250 points, and then 500 points. I mean, there's different levels of certificates. And then what you're going after is what's called the Shack Sloth Award. 1,000 points as a chaser constitutes a Shack Sloth. They're the folks that are sitting at home, making those QSOs. And it's got the SOTA emblem on it, and it's supposed to represent like a block of ice. Each one of them is unique. They make these things up. I mean, probably made out of plastic or something. I don't have mine yet. Don't have any points yet. I'm working on it. But they make them up in Scotland, I think. And it's kind of a neat little award. But it's like $20. So when you get your 1,000 points, you can get one of these. And then there's stages after that. I mean, there's folks that are multiple Shack Sloth award. 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 points because they spend a lot of time doing this. All right, being an activator, which is really what I kind of enjoy doing most. So these are the operators that are going portable on those summits, and it's really not that difficult. I mean, obviously some summits are pretty difficult, but Kennesaw Mountain is a SOTA peak, and it's it's not that difficult to hike up to the top of Kennesaw Mountain. Stone Mountain is you can take the what do they call it, the tram up the top of Stone. I haven't done it yet myself because it's only 1 point, so I don't feel like going up there. But I mean, one of these days I'll get around to doing it. Brasstown Bald. What is it over in the highest point over in Alabama? Thank you. State Park right up there. You just drive right up to the top of it. I got out of my truck, set up my stuff, and I had a great day operating over on that state park. So it's not that difficult. You don't have to be in great shape to do this. It certainly doesn't hurt, but it'll help you get into shape. Why do it? Well, these are some of the things that I think you kind of get out of it. I think it's great emergency communications practice. I mean, like a lot of you, I got a big go box at home. It leaves my house once a year for field day. I mean, I've got it, and maybe I'll use it someday. Honestly, I can pick up my little KX2 and all my gear, and I can be out of the house in 5 minutes. And if I was really going, if I'm trying to, if something was happening emergency-wise, and I had to get out of my house, I'm probably going to take this little backpack, and I'm good to go. So I think it's good emergency communications practice. Of course, lower noise. I mean, you get up to the top of some of these peaks, you turn on your radio, and sometimes you're like, is this broken? Is it, there's stuff that you don't hear anything, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I get on 40 meters right now, and I can't hardly, the QRN is just so loud with what's going on in the area. It's good exercise. Once I really got big into being an activator, I've lost 25 pounds. I got a lot more to go, but it's been great exercise. It's a lot of fun. You're not dealing with any HOA issues. Nobody's going to get on your case about what kind of antenna you're putting up. You do have to be, there are some places like Kennesaw Mountain, for example, National Park. They're probably not going to let you throw an antenna up in a tree because they're a little picky about their trees and stuff like that. But you can set up a different type of antenna situation. And you got the awards and certificates to chase after. And I should have said this at the very beginning. I appreciate the questions we got already. I want this to be interactive, so please just jump in there if you got any questions for me. We're going to do a little bit of show and tell, and at some point you'll probably have to give me the hook because I could talk about this stuff all night. So, how do you kind of plan for these things? If you want to go out as an activator, go to that website and start researching these peaks. So again, the same site or same page I showed you already that just happens to be kind of the northeast half of Georgia. The other half here, which is straight north of us, is what they call the historic high country. So it has a different designator, so there's a lot of peaks up there as well. But you would go up there. One of the first things, if it's your first time, you kind of look and see, it tells you how many times that peak has been activated. Well, what's number 1? 48. Is Brasstown Bald. Well, why? Because it doesn't take any work to get up to the top of Brasstown Bald. And you'll look down here. Penson Knob has never been activated. It's an 8-point peak. That's pretty good points, but nobody's done it. Well, some of these are on private property, and so some of them are just a real bear to get to. There's most of the ones that I do tend to be off of a trail like the Appalachian Trail or the Benton McKay Trail or Bartram Trail. We got a lot of trails around here. I prefer doing those. I have done some of the ones where you got a bushwhack. I try to save those mostly for what's coming up in the winter because it kills down all the brush and briars and stuff like that. You have to wade through those things. But so I don't know what the deal is with Penson Knob. But if you click on whatever peak you're interested in, I think I chose Blood Mountain for our example. It'll pull up a page for that peak, usually with quite a bit of information. At least for North Georgia. Now, if the peak has never been activated, there may not be a whole lot there, but a lot of times what you find is, previous activators have put things in there about, trail descriptions about how to get up there, what the cell phone and APRS coverage is, sometimes a photo gallery. So here's Blood Mountain. It's been, a couple of folks have been activating it since, there's been a lot of more activators. It tells you, who the last person, so there was me. I did it back on July 30th. So I'm not going to bother with it again until after January 1st so I can get those extra points. But there's just a lot of information there. There's tracks, sometimes GPS tracks. So I'm going to show you another app that when I'm hiking, it basically creates a track of my hike, and you can upload those. So especially for the ones you got to bushwhack, it kind of sometimes shows you how somebody else has gone and successfully gotten to that peak and made your work a lot easier. So there's just a lot of information there. So then I clicked on one of the ones that showed access to trail information. So it just kind of talks about, you're all probably familiar with Neal's Gap. The parking area is actually half a mile down, so you got to do an extra 0.7 miles on that hike because you got to get from the parking area up to the trail and then continue up the trail. I did this one with my son and daughter-in-law back in the summer, and it's a beautiful hike. It's a fairly tough one. I mean, it's about 2 miles one way, and it's a steep one, but it's a lot of fun. And then this is the app that I mentioned to you. This one's called Gaia GPS. I'm sure there's all kinds of GPS applications. This just happens to be one that I use. I have this on my cell phone. It works off the GPS on your phone, and so even if you don't have cell coverage, it still tracks very accurately where you are. And it has different layers of maps. I have it on the most basic setting right now, but you can pull up different layers of maps. So a lot of the National Geographic puts out a great map series for all the national parks. So all of North Georgia is covered. And so that's a layer that you can put in there, and it will track your elevation gain as you're hiking. So this was, where we started at the parking area, and what happened. There we go. See, I don't know how long it'll last, but let's move along here. Maybe that's my clue to go faster. So it tracks your elevation gain. It shows you when you're stopping and starting and all that kind of stuff. So it's really kind of handy. And I will actually plan trips. You can use this app in advance of a trip. You can actually pick your points on the map and make a track for it to follow, and it'll give you a good idea of what kind of climbing I'm going to be doing. So I find it very helpful. Now I subscribe to what's called the premium service, which is like $20 a year. It's not that much at all. I find it to be very worthwhile. So I highly recommend that one. Like I said, I'm sure there's other ones out there. This just happens to be the one that I use. And now, it won't. Yeah, what is going on here? I'm gonna wake it back up here. There we go. Okay, so what to take with you? First thing to start off is what we call a 10 essentials. This is really for anybody that's doing any outdoor, camping, hiking, or whatever. This is basically your safety stuff. You want some type of navigation. I always have a paper map with me, but I hardly ever pull it out of my pack because I use that GPS. But it's wearing down my battery, so I do have a paper map in case my battery gives up on my phone. Some kind of sun protection, some insulation, weather season appropriate. So if something happens, you're not going to, the idea here is if you get stuck out there for a little while, you're going to be able to survive, maybe overnight. I honestly don't necessarily take all this stuff every time. When I'm up here in North Georgia, for the most part, I'm not too worried about, making it through a night or something like that. So it hasn't happened yet, thank goodness. You want some kind of illumination if you get stuck out there in the dark. Of course, a first aid kit, something to start a fire with, some repair tools, a little bit of food. To always have a couple of protein bars or something with me. Your water. And some type of emergency shelter. It doesn't have to be a tent or anything like that. It could just be the clothes that you're wearing. Like I said, during the summer here, I used to take my rain gear with me all the time. But it's so hot that even when it's raining, I'm not wearing that raincoat. I don't typically try to do these activations when the weather's going to be getting, bad. I always check the weather in advance. But my cutoff is kind of like if it's going to be 70% chance or more of rain, then I might not do the hike. But I have found that, as you know, the weather reports are so flaky that if I decide not to do the hike, it turns out to be a beautiful day, and then I just sit at home cursing, at the television or whatever else I'm doing, and I missed a great day of hiking. You had a question?
Yes, I noticed you didn't have any bear spray on.
No, that's true, and I haven't run into a bear on the trail yet.
Yeah.
I have seen a bear, but it was when it was a tiny little one. But I was in my truck driving down a Forest Service road. He was out in the middle of the road. But I was making a lot of noise that day when I was on the trail because I don't want to really run into a bear on the trail. when that trip comes, I'm taking my brother with me because he always has bear spray with him. So he's not a ham operator, but so antennas. What I use, I started with this system is called Pactena, which some of you may be familiar with. If any of you ever listen to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast, there's a fellow out in California, George KG6VU, that makes this antenna system. So it's this mast here that goes up to about 35 feet. This is a fiberglass mast. He's got a dipole system, a linked dipole for 20 and 40 meters. And then it has a little end-fed one, which is the one that I actually use the most when I'm using the Pactena system. It's just basically a random length wire, and I use an antenna tuner. So I don't use this one hard. I brought it along just so you can see it if you want to see how much it weighs. That's why I don't use it. It weighs a lot more than the other one. It's about 3 pounds just for that mast, and every little bit of weight counts. But that is, and there's all kinds of other antenna systems out there. SOTA Beams, which is a UK company, which is kind of associated with, I think the founder of SOTA Beams may have been one of the guys that actually started the whole SOTA program, but he has a company devoted to a lot of his QRP stuff and light gear, and so they have mast systems and antenna systems. The antenna that I use the most is what's called the QRP Guys Tri-Band Vertical. The QRP Guys is just a little group. They have a lot of little kits. And so the vertical is it's a little PCB board that I think there's a couple of toroids you got aligned on it. And basically it uses this is a Chinese fiberglass fishing pole from eBay that goes 7.2 meters in length. It's super light. It costs about $11. I ordered 7 more. I got them the other day because I'm worried, with the trade wars going on, maybe these things are going to go up to $20 or something like that. I don't know. But these things are fantastic. And you extend the thing out. You basically rubber band that little PCB board to the bottom of the pole. You run your wire up with a piece of rubber band at the top, and then it has 4 radials coming out of it. And it gives me 40, 30, and 20 meters, which is usually where I'm operating. They also have an 80 and 60 meter version, which I have. I just haven't put it together yet. So someday you may see me with poles on both sides, so I can have both of those antennas with me. But this is when I was up on Stratton Bald. I've got a little guy rope system that I put up there. It's very quick. It takes me probably 5 minutes to set the antenna up. But there's all kinds of options out there. But you do obviously need to have some kind of antenna system. For your 2-meter operations, this is what I use. It's the N9 TAX J-pole. He's got a couple of different versions. Mine is the 2-meter, 70 centimeter version. So it's pretty handy. String that up in a tree. In most of the places that I'm up on in North Georgia, I'm using this primarily to be able to hit a repeater so that I can send out an APRS signal. You can spot via APRS. So if I don't have cell phone coverage, if you can get repeater coverage and get APRS connection, you basically send a text message out via APRS. You have to register for that on the SOTA website as well, so that it will recognize your call sign. But that's another way of setting a spot out there. And then if you can't get a signal out at all, you just got to hope that somebody has seen your alert that you put out in advance. And I've never had one where that hasn't been the case, because if you're somewhere in the general vicinity of where you said you were going to be, band-wise, and you start calling CQ, they will hear you pretty quickly, and you get a little pile-up going. It's kind of fun. I'm not much of a contester. I do enjoy making DX contacts and stuff like that. But for a very few minutes, you kind of feel like a DX station because you'll have a pile-up of stations trying to contact you. So it's a lot of fun. But I use it mostly for the APRS. Although you can do 2-meter contacts as well. I just haven't had that much success with them. I have a harder time getting my 4 contacts on 2 meters than I do on these other bands. Now radios. I use the Elecraft KX2. I love this radio. Of course, there's the KX3. But this is, for me, it's great. I've got it here. I'll show it to you. 10 watts max. But it's all modes. 80 to 10 meters. And it's got the version I have has got the built-in antenna tuner, so I can work it with this vertical antenna very easily. It's got a rechargeable battery. I've got 2 of them, but the battery will last, for that amount of wattage that you're putting out. I mean, it'll last you all day. So I usually just take the one battery with me. I've got the mic, for the single sideband operations. It's got a little paddle that you attach to it, and this is my favorite one to use. But I also have one of these little mountain toppers, it's called. I have the 4-band version. If any of you have ever heard of Steve Weber, I can't remember what his call sign is, but he's made a lot of kits. He had one called the Appalachian Trail Sprint, the ATS, and they had like 4 or 5 versions. But now it's been picked up by L&R, and they manufacture it. They're not cheap. It's a nice little radio. I've used it a couple of times. I haven't had it as long as the KX2, but to be honest with you, I use the KX2 a lot more just because this one is only CW, which I don't have a problem with, but it doesn't have a built-in antenna tuner, so unless you've got your antennas that are dedicated for the 4 bands that this one operates on, there's a 3-band and a 5-band version. You've got to have some kind of antenna tuner, and then you've got to have your power battery. It'll work on a 9-volt battery or 12 volts, and so but you got to carry your power with you. You got to carry a little paddle. So by the time I add all that stuff together, it's almost the same as, and I've got that with me too, so you can take a look at it. But it's about the same as using weight-wise as the KX2. So I just like using the KX2. It really, there's all kinds of radios. The Yaesu 817 is still very popular. It's a 5-watt radio, all modes, all bands. And there's guys that use, full-size radios. It's just a matter of whether you want to haul a big battery around. It's really about what kind of power you're willing and weight you're willing to carry. So it is possible to operate, with 100 watts. In fact, one of those guys that was up on Raven Ball that day, I was up there. He had a 990 or something with him. I can't remember what he had, but he had a massive pack on. I was like, no, you're not going to see me carrying that. But
has anybody ever tried playing with solar power?
Yes, and I haven't done it yet myself, but there's a lot of guys that have solar power. The power film solar systems are very popular, right now because they have roll-up and fold-up solar panels. the technology today, we live in a marvelous time, for our hobby. So solar power, I just haven't built that into my SOTA operations yet, but I'm planning on doing it. So yes, solar power can be done too. Like I said, the only rule is you got to be portable. You can't be connected to your car battery, or AC mains of some type. This is just the packing list that I use. I have a packing list that I have so I can always remember what to take with me. Because occasionally I take my stuff out of my pack and I'll be using it somewhere else. And so I'll be happy to send this to you if you're interested in it. It's just kind of individual to me. So when you get up on the summit, I set up my antenna. Like I said, it takes me probably about 5 minutes. I'll either use this vertical or I'll use that Pactino one that I just kind of throw up in a tree. I have a little arborist weight with some rope on it that I can swing up into a tree and attach that antenna to it with some coax. Be careful pulling it down. The last time I was out, I had it up over on like a dead branch, I guess, and I was pulling my antenna down. The antenna came down, landed on the ground, and I was getting ready to pick it up, and that big branch came down and smacked me on the back of my head. I had a big gash in my head. If it had been much bigger, I think it would have knocked me out. That's the first time I might have needed somebody to come and rescue me, but I made it home all right. But that was a mess. I had to take my bandana out and wrap a big bandage on the top of my head. I thought somebody had come and thrown a rock at me. It was not fun. But then I will try to send a spot out with my cell phone or APRS coverage. These North Georgia mountains will drive you insane with cell phone coverage. Sometimes you get a little bit of a signal, and it comes and goes, and you literally walk around, putting your phone up and trying to figure out, all right, don't move 3 inches. But I'll do that for a few minutes and give up, and then use my APRS, and if that doesn't work, I'll just start calling CQ. So then for CW operations, that's pretty much the exchange. I'll call CQ, I have it programmed into my radio, so I push a button and it's going to go CQ SOTA from N3 and NU. I use the /P because I'm kind of old style that way. There's really no reason to do that anymore because if you're doing SOTA, people know you're not at home. I just kind of do it that way, because it tells people I'm not at my home QTH. But I'll send a call out there, then the chaser will just throw out their call sign. This happens to be Bruce up in New Jersey. He's my most frequent chaser. And so I know him by name now. We've never met, but I sure appreciate this guy because I always, if I don't hear from Bruce, I'm like, man, what's happened? Is he, is he sick? Is he in the hospital? And then he'll sometimes email me later that day, hey, I'm sorry I missed you, whatever. But you kind of you become friends with some of these folks. So then he throws his call sign out there, so I'll just respond back, W2SC, thank you, 579-579. And then he'll come back, thank you, you're 579, or whatever the call is. Unlike contesting, you're given a real signal report here. So sometimes it's 339 or 229 or whatever. And then, 73, and then on to the next one. I usually don't even send QRZ because there's usually, like I said, a little bit of a pilot there. So as soon as they hear that other chaser finish up with you or you send 73, somebody else is going to jump in there. And that's what the exchange is. And it's pretty much the same thing on single sideband. It's just, maybe a little bit more chatting there. So very quick and easy to do. After you get back, the important thing to do is you got to log those contacts. You got to go into that website and log in. Now, I still usually paper log. I'll show you my little log here. When I'm doing CW, I have an app on my phone, ham log. Some of you may have that. I just fat finger that too much. I'm not very good at getting the actual call signs in there quick enough. So I really only use that if I'm on single sideband or maybe doing 2 meters. I don't use it very often. It's kind of handy because if you get them logged in there, you can just basically dump a file right in and copy it. For the SOTA QSOs, all they want is the time, of course the date, the call sign of the station, and I don't even think you put the signal report on that.
Frequency.
And the frequency, yeah, and the mode. But you just, they have a unique way of doing it. You have to match it to their system. And so I try to log kind of the same way they do it. But you want to get those in the record. And then awards for activators. The award that you're working for as an activator was called the Mountain Goat. So that's 1,000 points. It's going to take a lot longer to get 1,000 points as an activator. I'm almost at 1,000 points as a chaser. I'm not quite there yet. I'll have that pretty soon. And I've only been doing this for a little over a year. An activator, at the pace I'm going, it's going to take me probably 3, maybe 4 years to get it done. I'm at about 260 points right now. And I'm itching to get out again. It's been almost a month since I've been out activated. Now, if this is too much for you, I got to kick out this. I saw this about 6 months ago on Facebook. ROTA activation alert. Recliners on the air. This guy put this alert out here. ROTA activation number 2. Recliners on the air from Ohio. Hiked here on foot and will operate on portable power per the rules. And it's all about the rules, my friends. I thought that was hilarious. I really got a kick out of that when I saw that one. And then, so, what kind of questions? And I'll show you some of the gear here that I have here. Sir.
I want to be a chaser.